Fueled by Temperance Spirits, Edmonton's leading non-alcoholic beverage provider. Order online for doorstep delivery.
Welcome back to Game Over Edmonton, your local leader in post-game Oilers analysis. In this episode, it's fueled by Temperance Spirits, the city's leading non-alcoholic beverage provider.
Visit Temperance online for a curated section of non-alcoholic options. Choose from a variety of craft beers, mocktails, wines, and spirits.
Temperance isn't just a retailer, it's a community of Edmontonians who celebrate the spirit of socializing without the need for alcohol. And with Temperance Spirits online shop, ordering your favorite non-alcoholic bevies right to your door is as easy as Connor scoring the winning goal.
You can find our partners at Temperance online at www.temperance-spirits.com for delivery to your door, and use the code SDPN for 10% off your order at checkout.
And give them a follow on Instagram and Facebook at Temperance Spirits.
The NHL season's heating up, and there's never been a better time to get in on the action. Whether you're looking to hammer home and Leon Draisaitl anytime goal or ride the puck line with the Edmonton Oilers, our partners at Sign Up Expert want to make sure you're ready to sweat your bets with one of the best.
Sign Up Expert is hooking up our listeners with one of the newest sports books available in Canada, Betano. Betano is home to some of the best odds when it comes to betting on the NHL and offers unique markets, including virtual soccer and basketball.
All you have to do to get started is scan that QR code on your screen or click the link in the description to register and place your first bet. If you thought Jack Campbell ending up on waivers was the best surprise of the season so far, wait until you try Betano.
You heard the man. Don't walk, run to check out Betano today. Scan that QR code or hit the link in the description below to get started and start sweating your bets with the best.
And always remember to bet responsibly and within your means. Viewers must be 19 plus to sign up for Betano.
Yo, yo, yo. What is up? What is up? We are live. Game over. Edmonton. The start of things, it looked good. Edmonton was rolling up 2-0, but they fall tonight to Tampa Bay 6-4 on the road. It's your boy Avry Lewis McDougall here hosting tonight, and back again for a second time on Game Over Edmonton. It's Jason Adams. Welcome to the podcast, Jason. How you doing? Welcome back to the show, buddy. How you doing, Jason?
Well, you know what? I was doing pretty well, and then things started to go bad, and then we got up again, and I was doing better, and then now I'm a little grumpy, but other than that, I'm well. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course. Edmonton, this is a game in which the Oilers come into Tampa Bay, Jason. They're on a 3-game road trip. They're getting the new coach bumped. Things look good. They go up 2-0. This is a game in which it starts off with scoring from depth scoring. And then after Edmonton goes up 2-0, the final 40 minutes of this game was just a game in which they couldn't sustain. They got shots on net, but they couldn't get anything again past Tampa. Over 40 shots on net. And this is a game in which there were just too many miscues defensively. And unfortunately, they could not get a timely save from Stu Skinner, Jason.
Yeah. I'll preface this by saying I think Stuart Skinner has been, he's had really good the last 3 games before this one, and I think a lot of what's gone south this season isn't necessarily on him. I mean, there's been some defensive issues in front of him, and both him and Campbell have had their share of struggles. But yeah, it's hard to win a game in this league when your goalie gives up 5. There's some funny bounces in front of him. There were some, defensive miscues, but, ultimately, you let in 5 with the goalie in and you let in 1 more, like you're not winning a lot of games in the NHL where you allow 6 goals. And that's kind of the long and short of it, is that it doesn't matter whether the goalie actually played well or not. It's the fact that, you let in 6, like regardless of who's at fault. So it's really tough to win in that scenario.
No, of course. And it was a game in which the start looked fine. They were on tempo aggressively. They're controlling the pace of play. We saw they got a short-handed goal. Derek Ryan, someone who I want to see a little bit more of in this early going on season, gets his first goal of the year. greasy goal, a goal in which it wasn't really a shot, like a whiff that got past netminder. This is a game in which Edmonton came out flying. They were up 12-4 in shots. They also got a goal from James Hamblin, his first NHL goal, a career goal, which was great to see him. We know his story. He's battled hard to make it to the NHL, undrafted free agent player. And
Yeah, that's your feel good moment of this game for sure. Is Hamblin managing to pot one and pointing up to the rafters, and
yes,
that's the thing. Things were going so well until they weren't.
it's true. Just seeing how they were dictating the pace and pushing back against Tampa Bay, and of course we know, yes, there's no Vasilevsky, but it's still a dangerous team that still has Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov. This is a team that is still one of the better ones in Eastern Conference. And the fact that they couldn't sustain that, and the fact that this effort just dropped off and just could not sustain what they had, was very disappointing in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it was like you're saying, the Oilers finally got some contributions from their bottom six, and they've been waiting for that kind of all season long. Like Fogel's potted a couple, but I think 2 of his 3 goals came when he was playing in the top 6, and really, other than that, nobody had done much of anything to this point. You've got Connor Brown, who earned a nice big bonus today, and hasn't put up a point yet, which is something we can maybe talk about later. But McLeod hasn't managed a goal going into today. Hamblin hadn't had anything. Ryan hadn't had anything. I'm not quite sure why Adam Erne is still on the team, but he hasn't got one either. They called up Lavoie, who I think has had some good moments, but he hasn't produced either. So for this team to get 3 goals from its bottom 6 and still not pull out a win, it's pretty disappointing.
No, of course it is, and you see, on most teams, if your bottom 6 is producing, that's a really good thing. But again, this is an effort in which the bottom 6 steps up, and then everybody else, for the most part, fell off. I know it's good and bad. It's good and bad to see McDavid and Draisaitl not be on the score sheet. It also means yes, you're getting scoring from elsewhere. But you want to see your top dogs score in key moments, and we didn't get that from Dry or McDavid today, Jason.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of said it before we got on live here. Is try to explain to last year's versions of Avry and Jason that Edmonton was losing games because of its power play. The idea of it is absolutely ridiculous, but it's true. Like, Edmonton had opportunities today. They went 0 for 5 on the power play. They couldn't get a goal on the power play when they needed one. And unfortunately, that's, I try not to critique those guys too much, because they have produced really well for this team in the past. They've done some incredible things, provided some incredible moments. But Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, point blank, have not been good enough, especially over the last, week, 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. And there's going to be ebbs and flows as the season goes on, but I don't think McDavid or Draisaitl can be very happy with their performances of late, and I'm sure they're going to pick it up. It's going to come back around. I'm not really worried about it, but like I said, if you've got your Derek Ryans and your James Hamblins producing, but McDavid and Draisaitl can't put up much of anything, then it's tough. I mean, we watched this team for so long that couldn't get anything done unless McDavid and Draisaitl made it happen. So when your bottom 6 does chip in, you really need your star players to be your star players and put some goals on the board. And they didn't do it. And they haven't done it a lot lately, which is concerning.
No, of course. You mentioned the power play. Of course, you mentioned right there. Like last year, I'd have been laughing if you told me the power play was going to be their Achilles heel in a game like this. It goes 0 for 5, and the power play this year, it's not. Of course, it's not going to break the record this year. It's not bad, but seeing them having games in which there's nothing right in the power play man advantage, it doesn't make sense, because there were chances in which you thought Edmonton would get at least 1 or 2 power play goals here. And the fact that they had 5 cracks it and got nothing is incredibly surprising.
Yeah. I mean, last year the power play produced at a historic pace, and credit to the other teams in the league. Obviously, like, this is the best hockey league in the world with the best coaches in the world and the best video equipment and reviews in the world. Like, these teams watch videos, they understand what Edmonton's going to try and do, and they devise coaching strategies to stop them. So I think there's a part of that in play here, but at the same time, I mean, McDavid not being anywhere near 100%, and Draisaitl in a bit of a slump, and it's kind of underreported. Again, I love Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but I don't think he's been playing to the level he can too. So I think there's a lot of lot of guys in slumps right now at the top of the lineup, and Edmonton isn't really going to put a lot of wins on the board unless they're getting the performances they come to expect from McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, is that McDavid and Draisaitl's fault? No, I have more blame for the guy that put this team together. But the fact of the matter is the Oilers aren't going to win many games where McDavid and Draisaitl aren't making it happen personally.
No, exactly. And the one good thing was that, too many times we've seen the Oilers over the years play down to when a team has a backup goaltender or goaltender under one in net. The good thing is that they did get over 40 shots on net on Tampa. But again, what good is it if you can't score? That's the big thing. It's like, yes, they got production. Yes, they got everybody shooting towards net. But the fact that you only got 4 goals, you couldn't find a tying goal against a backup netminder. It's a tough look right now, really.
And it's an interesting point, because you look at how the Oilers are constructed. At some point, you feel like they decided they had McDavid and Draisaitl and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and figured they had enough talent and needed to add some grit to it. So that's why you bring in, Zach Hyman and Vander Kane. Not that those guys aren't talented, but I would call them more of a volume shooter than a finisher. They're not guys that really put up eye-popping finishing numbers in their career. And the problem with that is that when you get into funks like this, obviously Kane had 3 the other game, but if McDavid and Draisaitl aren't the ones pulling the wagon, then who is? Kane did it last game, good for him. Bouchard had 3 points, which I'm sure we'll get to Bouchard later. There's maybe a polarizing player on the Oilers right now. But and that's the challenge, right? You have this team that can put up very good analytics and create a lot of chances, but outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, is in terms of a true one-shot scorer, there's not a lot there, and there's definitely not a lot lower down the lineup. So again, I don't know if you know this, but the Oilers' record when they have more than 40 shots this year is 0-5-1. They have lost 6 games, but they have over 40 shots, and they haven't won a single one. So is it getting goalied? Is it flawed construction? Is it a combination of things? It's hard to say, but I would think that, if you're losing games to Jonas Johansson or Jonas Johnson or whoever was in net for Tampa today, that's not what you want. And he played well enough to win. I wouldn't say he had a good game by any stretch, but he did everything he needed to do for his team to win. And Skinner didn't, and I don't think Skinner's been bad. It's been pretty good of late, but again today, he had an 800 or an 821 or something like that, and you're just not going to win a lot of games with those kind of numbers.
No, exactly. And you mentioned, and this year the Oilers have lost Jonas Johansson and Mackenzie Blackwood in the same season. That is just, no matter how you cut it, that cannot happen. And you mentioned with Stu Skinner, I've been a very big fan of Stu Skinner. I think he's going to be a NHLer for a very long time, but he's not the guy you can roll right now for 25, 30, 35 games in a row. This is the kind of guy he needs help. And unfortunately, you mentioned the construction, that falls on Ken Holland and the contract with Jack Campbell, where he's put this team in a spot in which a sophomore goalie has to save this team, and it's a horrible spot to put the guy in.
For sure. And it was the exact same situation last year too. Campbell was virtually unplayable. He wasn't good from the start. He continued not being very good throughout the season. Towards the end of the year, he had a couple good starts against Anaheim, who was playing out the stretch at that point. But yeah, no matter how you slice it, one way or the other, the Oilers have to get another goalie. They have to bring somebody in, and it's going to have to be a trade, because Jack Campbell doesn't look like he's anywhere near being any kind of an answer at the NHL level. He went down to the AHL and he got smacked around by the Calgary Wranglers. And at some point you feel bad for the guy, because obviously he doesn't want to be in this position.
No.
And his agent did his job, got him a good contract. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity for Campbell to get a contract like that. So he signed it. No ill will towards him, no ill will to Nurse, who's the other overpaid guy on this roster by quite a lot. But at some point you have to point the finger at Ken Holland. He's gone through one coach, he's fired his second coach. Now there's rumors that he's been set aside or not really allowed to make any of his own decisions. But I mean, if you look at this roster, this is a roster that is now 5-10 with no cap space, with very limited capital trade prospect pool that is comfortably in the lower third, to say that generously, of the NHL. I mean, there's not a lot of options for a team that wants to turn it around and turn it around quickly. Like, if the Oilers don't have the pieces in place right now, I don't know how they get them. I mean, you could look at a lower end, cheaper option. I've said a couple times, I would love look into Alex Leon in Detroit, or another team's younger goalie. I mean, Brad Holland was in watching Montreal last night. You could look at Caden Primo, but I mean, those guys aren't really answers. Those are guys that can maybe come in and spot Skinner out, but I mean, it's Skinner, and it's basically nobody else at this point, unless they can pull off something shocking.
No, exactly. You mentioned the record now. This is a team that only has 5 wins, and now they continue their road trip. They're playing Florida. They got the Capitals coming up, and again, I know right now I do think this team will get out of this funk, but everybody above them in the Pacific Division and the Western Conference is still finding ways to get wins. You're still seeing Vancouver win games, Vegas still winning games, Anaheim, LA. Even if you were talking about, say, like a wild card spot, okay, they gotta deal with the fact that teams like Arizona are still in the mix for a wild card spot in the West. Like, it's not gonna be easy for this team to catch up. So, and they can't have games like this they can't drop any more games like this where they're up multiple goals against teams like Tampa Bay and leave with no points. They gotta find a way to close these games out to catch up in the division battle, Jason.
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of those better teams in the league than the Oilers are, I think Vegas finds a way to get a point out of this game at least.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Vancouver is having the craziest PDO run I've ever seen. So, I mean, with Thatcher Demko playing the way Thatcher Demko is, I mean, no way Tampa gets 6 in this game. So, I'm not saying the Oilers have to or are capable of going out and getting a Thatcher Demko inside of drafting one. I mean, how badly could this team use a guy like Jesper Wallstedt in the system right now?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you have to bring in another body, and I think at this point, like, the Oilers can kiss a dream of a division title goodbye. I mean, they're not catching Vegas, and they're probably not catching Vancouver. They're very likely looking at a wild card spot at best, and even then it's probably 50-50. So they're in a deep hole, and it's going to be really difficult to come out of. Like, they basically have to win like 3 of every 4 games, like, from now till the end of the season to get into it.
Right.
And that's going to be really tough. I mean, the previous years, like, the Oilers have been one of the better teams in the league after Christmas, and maybe they've got it in them again. I mean, who knows? But I don't think they can just sit on their hands this time until the trade deadline and then make a big trade for an Ekholm type and hope it saves them. I think they need to make a couple of moves here, and I think they need to do it very soon, because every loss just puts them further behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, no, it's completely true. And talking about the guys who are on the ice tonight now, someone who we mentioned, the polarizing figure, it is Evan Bouchard playing in his 200th game tonight. Now, granted, yes, this year has been a bit of a challenge at times for him defensively, but offensively, he comes in here tonight, gets a goal. He looked great offensively. He looked better as offensive defenseman. But I'm not going to be in the camp that wants to say Bouchard cannot play defensively, or he cannot be a responsible D-man. Again, he's still learning, he's still developing and growing. I still think that Bouchard, I'm not going to be there and say he can't be a defenseman, bench him. Like, I've seen some takes saying how Bouchard should be sent out to Bakersfield. That to me is ridiculous, Jason. That's ridiculous.
This fan base can produce some really wild takes sometimes, especially when they're frustrated. And you look back, like, even when Paul Coffey was a player, there were members of this fan base that hated him and wanted to go as soon as they could. There are people that are never going to be happy with a defenseman unless they're throwing huge bone crushing hits and going off the glass and out every time. I mean, that's just what some people like. When you're a guy like Evan Bouchard and you have the puck on your stick and you're looking to make plays and you're looking to make things happen, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. But I would rather have a guy that can make plays and will make the odd mistake than a guy that can't make any plays. I mean, Desharnais hasn't been bad this year, but I think that's what you look like when you get a guy that can't make any plays. And is sound defensively, I suppose, but he's been getting turnstile a couple times too. So with Bouchard, I think you have to take the good with the bad. He's not ever going to be Scott Stevens back there. That's just not how he's wired. That's not how he is. I mean, there's things that can be coached out of his game. There's been a lot said of his urgency or seeming lack of urgency. And I think that in itself is a good thing and a bad thing too, because sometimes you want a player that doesn't get rattled easily, that doesn't, they used to call it having ice water in their veins, but no matter what happened, they stayed cool and calm out of pressure. But Bouchard's an interesting case, because I think if you look at his underlying numbers, his in-zone defense is pretty good, but where he struggles is on the rush, and the Oilers have struggled on the rush all year long. So what has happened there to make that a thing, I'm not sure. Maybe Knobloch and Coffee can figure that out, but something happened that the Oilers really started to struggle on rush plays, and it's crept into everybody's game. I mean, I don't think you could look at any defenseman today and say they had an A+ game. I think any one of them made a pretty major mistake on a goal against. I mean, God knows there were enough goals against. So it's challenging. I mean, I like Bouchard. I think he's very good. I think he brings a ton to this team, but there's no denying he has his struggles defensively too. So the challenge is on Knobloch as to how to handle that.
No, exactly. Yeah, no. Every defenseman on this team today had an error. I mean, we saw it again when Tampa tied this game at 4 on the power play. We saw that Tampa cycle, the puck rapid fire going in the slot, gets Stamkos, and that really should have been on Cody Cece's play right there. He's not there, and Skinner has no chance. Stamkos ties up, and it's like that's just a big glaring error in terms of how Tampa was able to exploit Edmonton's D on the power play, Jason, quite easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goal specifically, you can't hang that on Skinner. Like nobody's talking that. The Jeannot goal, I mean, could he have gotten over it a little bit faster? Yeah, I think he could have. Bouchard didn't make the best play he could have at the blue line, but again, if you watch that play, he had to make that play because Leon Draisaitl sent a spinning backhand at him that he had to receive off the boards on his backhand, which puts him in a tough spot. I mean, if I'm the coach, I'm probably telling him at that point, just abandon the zone and pass it back to your D partner, like give up the pressure. But he elected not to, which was a mistake. Like I said, I don't think Draisaitl played that goal very well. I don't think Nurse played that goal very well, and Skinner I don't think played that goal very well either. So that was one of those plays where no matter like whoever you think is the most culpable for it, I mean, you're probably right. All 4 of those guys had something to do with that goal against.
No, it's true, and then of course, then that 5th goal, Luke getting ice in the game. That was a game winner just. That was probably one of the worst changes they've had this year, in which it turned into just organized chaos. Glendening gets in, beats Skinner, and I thought to myself like, wow, it was like a team that didn't know when to change. It was just pure confusion, and again, that can't happen to this team. It can't happen where a change that bad allows when they come in and score the game winner.
And that absolutely baffles me, because every defenseman Edmonton has was here last year. And Edmonton has had a number of really egregious, terrible changes this year. Like, remember that one game they had 2 bench minors for 2 men on the ice? I've never seen that before. Or no, they had 3 that game.
Yeah, 3. Like
that's insane. So I don't know what has happened. I don't know what's wrong with the communication. I don't know if it's a leadership issue. I don't know if it's a coaching issue. But yeah, the line changes this year have been bad, and they need to figure it out because it's costing them games right now.
Yeah, it really is. And so what's the solution? Well, you can't fire Chris Knobloch now. Like, you can't just say it's all coaching. Like, we've seen this happen now through Woodcroft and now Chris Knobloch. These odd changes. It's really bizarre.
Yeah. And it's been said more than once, like the issue with this team right now is individual mental errors and something simple like line changes. I mean, like these guys have been playing hockey their entire lives. This shouldn't necessarily need a lot of coaching in how to change players.
Yeah,
like this isn't Pee-wee. Like, these are NHL defensemen, some of them with careers in over a decade. In the case of a guy like Nurse or a guy like Matthias Ekholm, Brett Kulak's been around a long time. I mean, like, to think that these guys can't figure out line changes, I don't know how to make it more basic than that. Like, don't get on the ice until the other guy is almost off. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Right? Like, it is. Like, it is. Oh, like there's been little individual plays there have been little things that we've seen the Oilers do that you mentioned, Jake. You're right. Like, these are things you don't see kids in Pee Wee or midget do, or they work themselves out of. And it's tough because being in the room, you hear these guys say we have to clean up certain things. We know what to clean up. But when you see his mistakes repeated over and over and over again, it gets pretty frustrating to watch. It really does.
It does, and like what do you do about it? Do they need a change back there in terms of personnel? I mean, I don't know how you'd execute that. Like, basically everybody they have is either locked in via their contract, or they can't really afford to move anybody. I mean, I've seen a few people suggesting Everett Bouchard get traded, but I think that's nonsense. So to me, the obvious guy, if you're going to look for an upgrade to be moving out, is Cody Ceci, because his contract is movable. It's an acceptable amount. He's okay at what he does. Like, he's a 4-5 that sometimes gets forced into playing, a number 2 role, which he shouldn't be. And if you're looking to bring in a defenseman, I think he's the obvious guy to go out. But I mean, what's Cody Ceci by himself bringing? Probably not a lot. So then you're adding, a guy like Bourgault, you're adding your first round pick, you're probably adding another salary, and then you're getting into a lot of assets going out, and then you still don't have goaltenders. So the problems with this team are they're running pretty deep right now, and I partially understand why they got rid of Walt Woodcroft, because they couldn't do nothing. But at the same time, they have some holes, and the holes that they have in terms of needing a scoring winger, needing help on the blue line, needing a goalie, those are the same holes that were existent when Ken Holland took over the team. Now he's 4.5 years into his tenure here, and we still have the same problems. So, what's he been doing in this time?
Right.
I don't think he's been all bad, but he certainly hasn't been, an A+ GM, which you would think we would be getting with how much he makes in a season. I think he's the highest paid GM in the league.
I believe so. And yeah, it's really bizarre. And it's clear, but you're right, Jason. It's clear that this is a year in which Ken Holland is more of a figurehead. It's really more the power has gone towards Jeff Jackson in terms of moves. And he'll have his own guy in place come 2024, 2025. It's interesting because I mentioned that, and I've heard for the most part 0 leaks. There's been no leaks coming out. Like, usually you hear a name or 2 leaking out. I've heard nothing in terms of who could be the next GM. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe Jackson looks for someone who's more progressive and someone who we don't think to be a GM come next summer.
Well, I think probably the next guy was Steve Stais, but that ship has sailed. So who's up next after that? I mean, you could look at Brad Holland, you could look at Keith Gretzky, but I would really hope they would go outside the organization with this one. There's a number of very talented AGMs and other teams. Eric Tulsky in Carolina is probably the most popular one. But there are some other ones as well. Matthew Darsh in Tampa, I think. There's a guy in Toronto whose name I can't remember. That would be also a pretty good decision. I was looking into it a little while ago, and those are the 3 names that kind of stuck out with me. But it's tough. I mean, the Edmonton way would just be to hand it to the next man up, which would be Brad Holland. But I mean, he's got very little experience in this role. And experience isn't necessarily always the be-all, end-all. But at the same time, I mean, there's guys that have been AGMs and their roles around the league for 10, 15 years. They're still relatively young and relatively progressive. So I would really hope, please, for once, can this organization execute a proper search and interview a whole bunch of qualified candidates and make the best hire based on that, instead of just blowing their stack and hiring the next guy that is available out of Hockey Canada. I mean, to go along with Holland probably hanging him up after this year, I really hope Bob Nicholson does too. I mean, I know he's not really doing anything important these days, but he should have been gone with Pete Chiarelli.
No, I don't blame you. And the fact of this team, how it came out, a couple of years ago, that they interviewed Bill Zito for 2 hours and still didn't hire him, that's a facepalm moment.
Yeah, I mean, what's Bill Zito even done? Who's that guy?
Oh my gosh,
Florida's been terrible ever since, right?
Right? No, they've never They didn't. It isn't like they beat the Boston Bruins last Winter Cup final. No, not Florida.
I mean, as long as you pretend that hockey doesn't exist outside of Edmonton, it was a great hire. You know, bring in Ken Holland, bring in the next old hockey guy next. I mean, it's just depressing. Yeah, it honestly is depressing. Because this, you know, it was touched on, it was said by the team, it's been said by, you know, coaches, been said by management, by fans. I mean, the Oilers need to do something this year. I mean, cup or bust might be down and gone the road and over and done with, but you know, even though the team's 5-10, they need to go for it this year. You know, we've got Leon Draisaitl is you know, an unrestricted free agent after next season. McDavid is up the one after that. A number of their contracts are structured to expire at the end of next season. So, I mean, if Holland's a figurehead or not, I don't really care at this point. Like, somebody that is making the decisions and has the power to, you know, make these things happen needs to execute a move to help this team. And it's probably going to be in goal. A defenseman wouldn't be a bad choice either. I mean, they're not scoring a lot either, so they could look at a forward too. I mean, really, wherever you look, and the Oilers need help, except for center. I'd say they're pretty good. Some people don't like Ryan McLeod. I think he's fine. Left defense, I mean, you've got a ton of money on left D anyway, so yeah, I mean, so somebody has to still have the power and the decision-making capacity in this organization, and whoever that person is needs to recognize that things are bad and they need some help.
Yeah, and you mentioned go for it. Yeah, this can't be another year of waiting for next year. Again, you have Draisaitl, McDavid in their prime. You still have Hyman, you still have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and this team right now 5-10-1, and they are 7 points back of Anaheim. Like, I did not predict coming into the season, Jason, that they would be 7 points back of Anaheim, 5 points back of Seattle, and 3 points back of the Flames. I did not have that in my cards 16 games into the campaign.
Well, and hockey is such a game of confidence too. I mean, you give a young group like Anaheim has a taste of success. They're trusting their young guys. They've got Mintyukov in the lineup, who's playing very well. They've got, you know, Mason McTavish. They've got Troy Terry. I mean, Zagreus isn't having a great year, but you know, he's still up in the lineup. They've got a lot of talented young players that are riding a confidence high right now. I mean, will it last? Hard to say, but when everything is going well, when you're a young player, you feel like you could conquer the world. I mean, maybe it'll start to tail off when you know, gets into the season and they get into the, you know, the doldrums a little bit and things get tough, things get difficult. But I mean, nobody had Anaheim being this good. Nobody had Arizona being this good. Certainly nobody had Vancouver being this good, but nobody had Edmonton being this bad either. No. And there's some encouraging things in the underlying numbers, but there's some disparity between the public available numbers and the private available numbers. So, you know, are the Oilers as good as the underlying numbers say they are? I mean, probably not. And they're certainly not in terms of, you know, getting their, you know, finishing their chances and keeping pucks out of their net.
No, exactly. And now Oilers, they have their next 3 games in the road trip mentioned off the top. They got Florida, Carolina, and Washington. And really, on this road trip, for my mind, really, I think you have to win at least 2 of the next 3. Ideally, you want to go 3-0, but I think you have to minimum go 2-1 before you play Anaheim back at home on next Sunday.
Yeah, I would say that. And if you look at all, you know, the teams straight through to the end of the month when the Oilers have their break, I mean, there's no easy teams there. You know, like there's, like you said, there's Florida coming up, there's Carolina coming up. They've got Washington on Friday for American Thanksgiving. I mean, Washington's 8-6 now. They started this year terribly, but they've pulled it together and they're playing some good hockey and they're getting some saves, which would be nice.
Yeah, no, it would be nice. And for those of you watching on YouTube, please, if you have any questions, fire them your way. We'll get to them here on Game Over Edmonton before we wrap things up here on the show. And I know I mentioned the D-man. I mentioned Evan Bouchard, and wow, again, Twitter. There's always an opinion on D-man. There's always takes good or bad. And once again, he mentioned his contract, Darnell Nurse, the $9.25 deal. Again, I don't blame Darnell for taking that contract. I said before, like, if I was Darnell's agent, I would tell him take the money, dude. Like that's life changing money. But it's tough because there are moments where Darnell does make a great play. We've seen him before have great plays in 3-on-3, great plays offensively. But again, this was a game in which he's out of position today, and unfortunately, with that kind of contract, those mistakes that Darnell makes gets magnified even more due to the money he's making right now in this roster.
Absolutely, and it's not necessarily fair, and I mean he's commented on it himself, and it's tough, but I mean them's kind of the breaks when you get a contract like that. Like teams and fans want you to play up to it, and he hasn't. And it's not to say he's not useless. He does do a lot of good things. I think he's a top pairing defenseman. I don't think he's a number one, but ultimately, like you said, because of the contract he has, he's going to get a lot of scrutiny. And I don't know, obviously he doesn't particularly like that too much, but I think he understands it. But he's being paid like one of the top 5 defensemen in the NHL, and with all due respect to Darnell Nurse, he ain't that. So I mean it's challenging because what do you do with that contract? I don't think he's movable, and he's got trade protection anyway, so you're kind of stuck with it. But I mean, that kind of has a whole trickle-down effect on the rest of the defense. And it's challenging because I'm sitting here thinking about what specifically the team needs, and it's got a fair bit of needs, but I think they're really missing that kind of glue guy. If that makes sense? Like they've had that guy a long time ago in Matt Hendricks. I think they had that guy last year in Clint Costin. You need that guy around when things get tough, especially because he is the type of guy like Costin or Hendricks or even Gagne to a point this year too. He's the guy that keeps things loose, the guy that keeps that takes some of the pressure off, the guy that makes people laugh, and can things of like silly games to play after practice or whatever the case is. And I think you saw a lot of that in Costin last year. Like, I don't know how much impact he would have had long term on ice, but his impact in the locker room, I think, was pretty big. So, how do you get that guy? I don't know.
No,
I don't know. It's tough, but I do think that's part of what the Oilers are lacking this year. They had some big personalities. Like you look at even guys like Pugliarvi and Yamamoto. Like they had the big personalities that were goofing around. Yamamoto doing the triple headbutt before games. You had Clint Costin interacting with Tony Brar, pouring water down each other's shirts. Jesse Pugliarvi is like the human version of a golden retriever. So I'm sure he was a blast to be around too. So I don't know, like on top of all the underlying numbers, I don't know if their mix is quite right this year, which is it's hard. It's a hard thing to find. It's a hard thing to identify.
Yeah, it's a good point to make though. I mean, it isn't everything, but that guy is important. You mentioned someone like a Clint Costin. You're right. You would see how he would keep the room loose, how he would harass Tony Brar, and after one game, Clint stole my fedora. He stole my hat one game. Like after the game, I'm waiting for a player. What did I see? Clint's hat come on my head. Took my hat off. like all right, Clint, settle down. You're right. That's the kind of guy. Like those are the kind of guys who keep the room light, and they're part of that. And I mean, there are some guys who do keep the room like a Sam Gagne is good at that. They'll be right though. The mix, we want to make sure this room is always in a good spot. And when this team was 2-9-1, Jason, I'd walk into a room after a game and you could just feel the tension. Like you would walk in and it would just feel like it was not a comfortable place to be.
It was palpable. Hey, like you could walk in there, it was kind of all around you.
Yeah, like it was. When talking to certain guys like Darnell, like Leon. I mean, I was there in the room when Leon didn't appreciate the question towards Stu. Like I thought that was gonna be a pissy volume 2. Like I thought, oh boy, here we go again. Like that's the thing. Like I love Leon as a quote, but man, when things don't go right.
Just for my own curiosity and probably some fans' curiosity as well, do you get the chance to ask many questions in press conferences and in the locker room like that, or
yeah,
you mostly there to listen?
Oh yeah, I've done before tandem, and to me he's been good. Like Leon's been good to me, but certain questions you can tell he doesn't like, and any question that might lead him into trying to take a shot at a teammate, he does not like at all. Like he
Yeah,
will check you on that.
He very obviously does not like that. And you see, some of the other people that cover this team that try and get him to say things that maybe are unkind about, a guy like Skinner or a guy like Bouchard, and he shuts them right down, right off the hop. And to me, that's leadership. Like, if there's any kind of accountability that needs to take place, you do that without media present, without fans present. Like nobody else really needs to be privy to that.
Wait, that's the one good thing you say all year long, is that this is a team, like you've seen before, different teams over the years where you might see a player call out an opposing, call out a teammate. Like, that's one thing about the Oilers. You will never see this team call out a teammate. They will never. They're band, like they one for one for each other. Like they'll always say, like this year they've said it's a collective. Even when Jay was still here, it was never one player's blame. It was a collective. It was never single out one player for an issue.
Yeah. And that's good, because, and again, like kind of shifting gears a little bit to coaching, like with Chris Knobloch coming in, one of the things I really like that he said is it's going to be part of his job to alleviate the pressure somewhat, especially with big stars like McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, they don't need other people to tell them when they're playing well and when they're not playing well. They know that. They know that very well. They put so much pressure on themselves. Draisaitl specifically, it's honestly hard to watch sometimes how hard he is on himself and how much pressure he puts on himself. And McDavid does it too. So if Knobloch can come in and find a way to kind of lighten the mood a little bit, I think that will really help, because these guys, like, every loss, it's just it's like somebody kicked their puppy, right? And you don't want that mentality. Like, you want teams that don't they hate to lose, obviously, but you can't have doom and gloom every loss, because you need to shake it off, and they need to shake this loss off, and they need to go play well next game, because they still need those 2 points, and they need every 2 points they can get from now till the end of the season.
No, exactly. As we go to our part short, some questions came our way. Here's one question here I got from Conrad Krausert. I know the Flames and Oilers rarely make trades, but does Dan Vladar make the Oilers' goaltending situation any better? Dan Vladar, what do you think about that as a solution, Jason? Are you a Dan Vladar guy at all?
He might be okay as a 1B option, but the challenge is, I don't know. I mean, it's a low bar to say, like, is he better than Campbell? Yes. I mean, yes, of course, but that is that is not exactly shooting for the stars here. The challenge with Vladar is that I don't know if he's necessarily any kind of an upgrade on what we have. Looked into his numbers from last year and from this year, and he's not playing particularly well. For the right price, I would be cautiously interested, but I wouldn't be a guy that would be giving up a lot for Dan Vladar. If they were willing to move Markstrom and retain some, that's a guy I'm more interested in.
That'd be interesting. Just my worry is Markstrom back yet? Because after 2022, Markstrom, I'm worried that he's still to an extent broken, because his game has not recovered to what it was after that series in 2022.
To be fair, if he doesn't have to play the Oilers anymore, he might look pretty good.
That's a good point. That is a really good point. One more question here from Conrad. I see he asked maybe Nikhil Zadorov. Is that a guy you would think you would want to see come to Edmonton? I know he's been linked more towards Toronto, New Jersey, and Dallas. But what are your thoughts on a deal bringing Nikhil Zadorov to Edmonton, if possible?
I mean, he'd certainly bring an element the Oilers need. His physicality is impressive. He's a pretty good defender as well. My question with him is how much does he play on the right side? Because I know he's a lefty.
Yes.
And with Nurse and Ekholm and Kulak and Broberg down the left side, I don't know if the left side really needs all that much help. I mean, if he can play the right side, that's interesting. It's worth looking at. But the challenge with that also is what are you looking to get him? And if you're moving, say, CC and some picks, I mean, are you at all better off with him on your right side? It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think as poorly of Cody Ceci as some others do. But I personally would like to see them target a right-handed defenseman, And I think Chris Tanev would be a really good fit for this team. If we're talking about Calgary defensemen that could potentially be available, I'm much more interested in Tanev than I am in Zadorov.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, that's a game. That's a name I wouldn't mind seeing here as well too. Before I let you go, Jason, I want to ask you: Edmonton plays Florida coming up here. What do you want to see? What do you want to see him improve against Florida? What is the thing you want to see his team improve the most against Florida before they finish their Florida swing here?
I would really love to see this team put together a 60-minute game because they're having a lot of trouble with it this year. They're having periods they look absolutely dominant, and then they have periods where they look like they forget they're actually playing a competitive hockey game. So I think if they can bring a consistent effort for 60 minutes, I mean, win or loss, I think that would be an improvement. But I mean, honestly, we like just win. This team needs to win more than it needs anything else. So a moral victory isn't necessarily what this team needs to bring at this point. But if they do lose, I would rather they lose putting in a 60-minute effort than having a great period and then a meh period and then a bad period. And it's Jekyll and Hyde, which team's going to come out of the locker room at this point. So yeah, please play the entire hockey game. That would be great.
Yeah, exactly. It's a game of 3 periods, not a game of 2.5 periods of 1/3 of a period. It's the entire effort that this team is going to have to bring on Monday against Florida. I mean, before we go, Jason, well, ask people where can you find you on social media? What's your handles on Twitter? Where can people find you and your tweets at?
The easiest way to find me is at Adams on Hockey. I'm not really super on to many other social media platforms, but at Adams on Hockey, you can find me on Twitter /X until Elon breaks it worse, and then I'm on Threads, I'm on Blue Sky, but not very much.
Nice, awesome, amazing, Jason. Thanks for doing the show again. It was a blast talking to you and being blunt about this Edmonton Oilers hockey team. And hey, for those watching on YouTube and listening on the podcast, please support Game Over Edmonton. Support all of our channels. Like, subscribe, follow. I'll be back here again hosting for Edmonton, Florida on Monday evening. Until then, we are out of here. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night.
Game